In 1820, Florida remains under Spanish control, divided into two broad territories: Spanish West Florida in the Panhandle region, and Spanish East Florida covering the vast peninsula. The United States has negotiated the Adams-Onis Treaty, but has not yet taken formal possession. In 1821, the United States officially takes possession of Florida from Spain. The territory is immediately organized into two counties: Escambia in the west, governed from Pensacola, and St. John's in the east, governed from St. Augustine. Together they cover the entire territory. In 1822, Florida's western frontier begins to take shape as Duval County is carved from St. John's in the northeast, anchored by the new settlement at the mouth of the St. John's River, and Jackson County is created from Escambia in the Panhandle, covering the rich farmlands along the Apalachicola River. In 1823, two more counties emerge. Gadsden is organized in the Panhandle between the Ochlockonee and Apalachicola rivers, becoming a center of territorial plantation culture, while Monroe County is established at Florida's southern tip to govern the Key West settlement and the growing maritime trade. In 1824, Florida sees its biggest expansion yet with 5 new counties. Walton is carved from Escambia in the Panhandle. Leon is established around the new capital at Tallahassee. Alachua covers the fertile north-central interior. Nassau takes the northeastern corner along the Georgia border, and Mosquito stretches across the vast, unsettled lands south of St. John's. In 1825, Washington County is created from Jackson and Walton in the western Panhandle, filling in the gap between Florida's earliest western settlements and stretching from the Choctawhatchee River to the Apalachicola. In 1827, 3 new counties are organized across northern Florida. Jefferson fills the gap between Leon and Madison along the Georgia border. Madison extends the settlement frontier eastward, and Hamilton is carved from the northern reaches, completing a continuous band of counties across Florida's border with Georgia. In 1832, the territory continues to subdivide. Columbia is carved from Alachua and Duval in the north-central region. Franklin is established along the Gulf Coast at the mouth of the Apalachicola River, and Fayette County is briefly created, though it will soon be dissolved back into its neighbors. In 1834, Hillsborough County is created in the southwest, encompassing a massive stretch of the Gulf Coast and interior from Tampa Bay southward. It is one of the largest counties in the territory, covering land that will eventually be divided into more than a dozen future counties. In 1836, Dade County is carved from Monroe in the southeast, named after Major Francis Dade, who was killed in the opening battle of the Second Seminole War. It covers an enormous swath of the southern peninsula, including the Everglades, land that will eventually become Miami's home. In 1838, Calhoun County is carved from Franklin and Jackson in the Panhandle, named after Vice President John C. Calhoun. It occupies the land along the Apalachicola River's west bank, as Florida continues to organize its Gulf Coast frontier even amid the ongoing Seminole Wars. In 1842, Santa Rosa County is carved from Escambia in the western Panhandle, taking the land between the Escambia and Choctawhatchee Bays. It's named for the barrier island along its coast and finally gives the Pensacola region's eastern settlements their own government. In 1843, 2 new counties appear. Waukulla is carved from Leon along the Gulf Coast south of Tallahassee, taking in the St. Marks River and its port. Hernando is split from Alachua in the Central Peninsula, opening up the lands along the Withlacoochee River to organize settlement. In 1844, 3 counties are added. Benton is carved from Alachua and Hillsborough in the Central Peninsula. Marion takes a large section of north-central Florida's horse country, and St. Lucia is created along the Atlantic coast south of Mosquito, governing the Indian River settlements. In 1845, the year Florida becomes the 27th state, Levy County is carved from Alachua along the Gulf Coast and named for David Levy Yulee, Florida's first U.S. Senator. Orange County is created from Mosquito and St. Lucia, taking in the Central Lakes region that will one day become Orlando. In 1848, Holmes County is carved from Walton and Washington in the Panhandle, organized around the Choctawhatchee River Valley. It gives the scattered farming communities between Pensacola and the Apalachicola their own local government. In 1849, Putnam County is carved from Alachua, Duval, Marion, and St. John's in the northeast interior. Centered on the St. John's River, it becomes a hub for steamboat traffic carrying settlers and goods into Florida's heartland. In 1850, no new counties are created, but Benton County is renamed to Hernando. The original name honored Senator Thomas Hart Benton, but after he fell from favor with Southern politicians over his opposition to the expansion of slavery, the legislature chose to honor the Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto instead. In 1853, Sumter County is carved from Marion in the Central Peninsula, taking in the rolling hills and lakes west of the St. Johns River. Named after General Thomas Sumter of Revolutionary War fame, it becomes home to a growing community of settlers farming the interior highlands. In 1854, Volusia County is carved from Orange along the Atlantic coast, stretching from the Halifax River to the St. Johns. Named for a British-era plantation and trading post, it encompasses the coastal lands that will one day become Daytona Beach. In 1855, 3 new counties are established. Brevard is carved from Orange along the Atlantic coast, stretching down the Indian River Lagoon. Liberty is created from Gadsden and Franklin in the Panhandle along the Apalachicola River. And Manatee takes a huge portion of Hillsborough's Gulf Coast, covering the lands from Tampa Bay south to Charlotte Harbor and beyond. In 1856, 2 counties are created in the Big Bend region. Taylor is carved from Madison along the Gulf Coast, named after President Zachary Taylor, who served in the Seminole Wars. Lafayette is split from Madison further inland, one of Florida's most rural counties to this day. In 1858, 3 counties are created. Clay is carved from Duval south of Jacksonville along the St. Johns River. Suwannee is split from Columbia in the north, taking in the famous river that Stephen Foster immortalized in song. A new river is organized from Columbia and Alachua, though it will soon be renamed. In 1861, as Florida secedes from the Union and joins the Confederacy, 3 counties are reorganized. Baker is carved from New River in the northeast. New River itself is renamed to Bradford, and Polk is created from Brevard and Hillsborough in the Central Peninsula, taking in the vast interior lakes region between Tampa and Orlando. In 1887, after a 26-year pause through the Civil War and Reconstruction, Florida's county map explodes with 6 new counties. Citrus is carved from Hernando along the Gulf Coast. DeSoto takes a massive portion of Manatee and Monroe in the southwest. Lake and Osceola are split from Orange in the Central Highlands. Lee is created from Monroe on the Gulf Coast around Fort Myers, and Pasco fills in between Hernando and Hillsborough north of Tampa. In 1905, St. Lucie County is carved from Brevard along the Atlantic coast, reviving the name of an earlier county that had been absorbed into Orange decades before. It governs the growing citrus and pineapple farming communities along the Indian River south of Melbourne. In 1909, Palm Beach County is carved from Dade along the southeast Atlantic coast. The arrival of Henry Flagler's railroad has transformed the region, and the wealthy resort community around Palm Beach and West Palm Beach now warrants its own county government. In 1911, Pinellas County is carved from Hillsborough, separating the peninsula between Tampa Bay and the Gulf of Mexico. The fast-growing communities of St. Petersburg and Clearwater have long sought independence from Tampa's government across the bay. In 1913, 2 counties are added. Bay is carved from Washington and Calhoun in the Panhandle, giving the booming port city of Panama City its own county. Seminole is split from Orange east of Orlando, named after the Seminole people who once made their home in the region's pine flatwoods and prairies. In 1915, 2 more counties are carved from the Panhandle and southeast. Broward is split from Dade and Palm Beach along the southeast coast, encompassing Fort Lauderdale and the lands between the Everglades and the Atlantic. Okaloosa is created from Santa Rosa and Walton in the western Panhandle, filling in one of the last gaps along the Gulf Coast. In 1917, 2 counties are created. Flagler is carved from St. John's and Volusia along the northeast coast, named after railroad magnate Henry Flagler, whose developments transformed Florida's Atlantic shore. Okeechobee is split from Osceola and St. Lucie in the interior, centered on the Great Lake that bears its name. In 1921, Florida sees its largest single expansion with 7 new counties. Charlotte, Glades, Hardy, Highlands, and Sarasota are all carved from DeSoto, breaking up that massive southwest county into manageable pieces. Dixie is split from Lafayette in the Big Bend, and Union is taken from Bradford in the northeast. In 1923, Collier County is carved from Lee in the far southwest, encompassing the vast Everglades wilderness and the 10,000 islands. Hendry is split from Lee as well, taking the interior agricultural lands around Lake Okeechobee's western shore. In 1925, Florida's modern county map nears completion with 4 final additions. Gilchrist is carved from Alachua in the north. Gulf is split from Calhoun in the Panhandle. Indian River is taken from St. Lucie along the Atlantic coast, and Martin is carved from Palm Beach in St. Lucie. Florida now stands at 67 counties, the map largely as we know it today. As Florida's counties took shape across the 19th and early 20th centuries, one people endured through it all: the Seminole. After 3 devastating wars with the United States and the forced removal of thousands to Oklahoma, a few hundred Seminole refused to surrender. They retreated deep into the Everglades, living in scattered camps across South Florida's swamps and hammocks. By 1930, these permanent camps dotted the landscape from Big Cypress to the edges of Miami, small communities of chickee huts where families preserved their language, their medicine, and their way of life. They had never signed a peace treaty. The counties drawn across this map were drawn over land the Seminole never ceded. Today, the Seminole tribe of Florida stands as a sovereign nation, a testament to the resilience of a people who chose the swamp over surrender and kept their culture alive against extraordinary odds.